Robert Sapolsky, a neuroscientist and primatologist, was studying a baboon troop of over 100 members decades ago. Up to that time, baboons were observed and thought to live in hierarchical systems that were very aggressive and abusive, with those being lower on the social order lucky to survive and at any moment subject to violence from those ranking higher. For example, if an alpha male were to get upset for whatever reason, he would go to the closest beta male or a female and commence an ass whooping. The beta or female would then be observed immediately finding a baby or juvenile baboon and passing down those beatings to them, sometimes throwing them from the tops of trees to their death. Robert and his team observed this behavior for years and would tranquilize and extract blood samples, running tests to see how that stress affected the individuals on a cellular level. They noted that the stress significantly shortened the lifespan of those members who were lower in the hierarchy. He won awards for this research. One day, the troop had moved into a popular tourist destination that was fenced off. The alphas ascended the fence and raided the trash cans, eating tainted food. Shortly after, over half the males in the troop died from tuberculosis. Again, up to this point, baboons were observed and known for their aggression and violence towards each other. The males that were left after the alphas died were the betas, and being that they were next in the hierarchy, they assumed leadership of the troop. Robert observed that when the females, who had been conditioned and normalized under the dead alpha's abuse, would act out abusively or aggressively toward other members of the troop, the betas, who were now in charge, would step in and correct the behavior, letting the females know that this behavior was no longer acceptable and would not be tolerated. A profound change had taken place, a complete shift in the societal norms. Within 6 months, this change in energy and behavior of the troop had taken hold. What had been written off as a fact, that baboons were naturally aggressive and abusive towards one another, was no longer true. They were now grooming, sharing, and taking care of each member. The intertribe violence had completely ceased. 20 years later, and this new way of operating and socializing had become the standard by which the troop lived. These harmonious, peaceful ways of being had been passed down to the new generations. Had the behavior from decades prior never been observed, someone studying these troops after the change would never guess that baboons would ever treat each other so abusively. They would think that, because of their observations, baboons existed in harmonious societies. The future history had been rewritten. What no one ever thought could happen, happened, and it was done by the baboons, who never lost their sense of what was in the troop's best interest, and took action and stood up for what they knew to be right. As to how they ever became so socially chaotic and abusive in the first place is a whole other conversation, as that will be a deep dive into how we, as humans, found ourselves in the absolute hell we are in now. I am looking forward to breaking that down and feel it will be surprisingly simple. Through this example, we can see how things like behaviors, emotions, and therefore societal and cultural norms can be completely altered. What was once taken as a fact due to years of observation is no longer true. Just because we observe the way things are currently does not mean that they are normal, inherent, or correct. Just because our parents taught us that we must allow the state to inject our bodies with poisons through their medical interventions, taught us to infect our minds with their poisonous indoctrination centers, taught us to normalize giving over our authority, taught us licking the boots of police and military forces is ethical, and taught us slaving away our whole lives for fake money and status, and taught us numbing ourselves to what it means to be a human, does not mean these toxic behaviors are in any way natural, right, or acceptable. This is why taking responsibility and changing our behaviors and actions in accordance with what we can feel and know to be in alignment with our highest good and the greater good of all is the most important thing we can possibly do. Each one of us is personally responsible for living in accordance with what our souls whisper to us is appropriate. Others' actions, behaviors, and words are not our responsibility. Just because everyone else is giving over their sovereignty and blindly following a leader does not mean we must do the same. In fact, the exact opposite is true. If there is sin, the absolute damning one would be to justify our immoral actions and behaviors by comparing them to cultural and social norms and claiming ignorance. Ignorance is simply a choice. Ignorance is a cop-out. Ignorance is lazy. Ignorance is apathy. Ignorance is dangerous. Individually, we each pay the price every time we are given the gift of a harsh truth, and instead of changing course, continue down the same destructive path. Individually, we will each suffer the consequences of not listening to that inner voice and instead ignoring the wisdom it imparts. Each time we choose to follow abusive and toxic social and cultural norms instead of heeding the inherent wisdom we were born with, that voice that is looking out for our higher good gets harder to hear, and the messages come fewer and farther between. Do this long enough, and eventually one will come to view this gift of intuition as a minor inconvenience when consistently, day by day, choosing to destroy themselves with what they allow into their bodies and minds, causing the divide to widen and the separation of soul from body. Take care of yourselves, guys. Nobody else will.